So I remembered this quotation. It is often misattributed to James Baldwin. He did not say it. The person who said it was Robert Jones Jr., a novelist. And here is what he said: "We can disagree and still love each other, unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." So we can disagree and love each other, but not if our disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denies my humanity and denies my right to exist. So Korah, as we know, approached Moses and said, "Kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim," the entire community are holy. "V'lama titnasu al kahal Adonai," and why are you lifting yourself up above everybody else? The rabbis understood the dispute between Korah and Moses as a dispute that was not l'shem shamayim, not for the sake of heaven, not a dispute that would lead to a better place, but a dispute that was rooted in a negative space and would have, therefore, a negative outcome. So we don't live in a vacuum, and we're following the news, and you certainly were following the news of the Democratic primary for the mayoral election. And it's very disturbing. I found something that was written that I think is illuminating, because it's actually written by somebody who views himself as progressive, certainly viewed that way. His name is Jonathan Chait, and he wrote for The Atlantic. And basically, he wrote about how it is disturbing that the candidate who won, Zohran Mamdani, has not distanced himself from phrases that have been used as sources and stimulants of violence towards Jewish people. He has failed to distance himself from those statements, from people who make such statements. And the statement that he focused on is the statement globalizing the Intifada. So what Chait says was, you know what? Some people may actually use that statement and not mean it violently. But the fact is that many do mean it violently. In fact, that statement, sentiments behind that statement were used in recent months, he points out, to carry out homicidal or potentially homicidal attacks in Pennsylvania, governor's house, in Washington, D.C., the two people who were killed, in Colorado, the Molotov cocktails that were thrown at a parade in support of the hostages. So he says, yeah, the slogan might be ambiguous, but that makes it worse if you use it. You should proactively distance yourself from that phrase and from people who are using that phrase. You should make it very clear that you understand that that phrase and that understanding are behind attacks on Jewish people. And so he said, and I will quote the conclusion of what he wrote: "American Jews should be willing to accept a candidate for municipal office who does not share their views about the Middle East. A candidate who does not take seriously an incitement to violence against other Americans, though, is not something anybody should have to accept." Now, it's interesting. I hadn't heard of this candidate before recent weeks, and I looked at a lot of clips. Now, the president said that he's crazy and he doesn't look good. Those are not the criticisms that I would apply. There are plenty of criticisms that one could apply to this individual. What I found really striking is that in a clip where he appeared with Stephen Colbert on The Tonight Show, he was asked about the problem of anti-Semitism. And he said, "I recognize that it's a problem. And people who disagree with me when it comes to Israel, I still respect their rights as Jews to be able to live without being attacked and persecuted." But what he failed to do, apropos what Chait mentions in the article that I just quoted from, is to draw the direct line, because he mentioned the shootings in Washington and he mentioned what took place in Colorado, and he did not connect the dots. He is standing with, and at the very least, failing to condemn those who use that language in a way that does, in fact, lead to harm against an actual murder of Jewish people. Now, what Chait also mentions, which I've said a lot from the Bima, is that we have to be prepared to call out hatred and anti-Semitism, even when it comes from people who are part of our part of the ideological spectrum. And that is not something that people are always willing to do. Deborah Lipstadt says that again and again. It's easy to criticize the people who don't think the way you do and say, oh, those nasty anti-Semites, et cetera, et cetera. It is not always so easy to criticize the people in our own ideological camp. And this, again, is something which this candidate has failed, to my understanding, to do to the extent that it needs to be done. So now I'm going to look in the other ideological direction, because you may know that last year, the House overwhelmingly passed a bill that requires the Department of Education to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism in investigations of discrimination claims on college campuses. That definition by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance includes classic anti-Semitism that claims of Jews killing Jesus is anti-Semitic. So that's in there. There were some legislators on the right who said that there should be a carve-out for this, that you should be allowed to say that the Jews killed Jesus if it is in fact part of your scripture. Now here, I would make the very clear claim, and I hope that nobody here will contradict me, that the notion that the Jews have killed Jesus has been used to torture and kill Jews for thousands of years. You cannot make that statement. You cannot defend that statement and say, I am not aiding and abetting anti-Semitism. You just can't do that. It is ridiculous. It is verbal malpractice. It is lunacy to say that there should be an exception for that particular claim. So I know it's the summer months, and I know we are looking forward, all of us, to some rest and relaxation, but I just want to remind us that we have to continue to be vigilant. And when somebody says, I disagree with you, but I care about you, we need to look very carefully, and we need to be able to say, if your disagreement with me leads to my suffering, then we don't love each other. Then we are not friends. Then I cannot allow you to continue to do what you are doing without consequences. And I'm finally going to urge us, because this is what Jews do, to also look within. If there are things that we say, if there are things that we fail to condemn that are indeed causing the suffering of other people, then we need to be prepared to speak out about those things as well. Whether they are taking place in the United States, whether they are taking place in Israel, whether they are taking place elsewhere throughout the world, even if those things are coming from our own ideological space, we have a responsibility. Machloket l'shem shamayim is fine. Let us all disagree in order to bring truth into the world. But if our disagreements lead to the suffering of others, we need to look carefully, and we need to make the appropriate changes, and we need to have the courage to speak out on behalf of real decency and the kind of truth that lifts up all people. Shabbat Shalom.